in advisement, FERPA considerations in advisement. So, some few things here. PowerPoint work. No? Okay. So our session overview here, we're going to introduce who at the university are kind of leaders with FERPA, and then talk a little bit about a FERPA elevator pitch. Most of our time is going to be spent on these FERPA FAQs and facts, and then we're going to have some time to ask the experts at the end. So joining us today, I'm going to let, if both of you are willing to unmute and kind of introduce yourselves and say how you work with FERPA here at the university. So Mr. White, if you want to go first, I would appreciate it.
Good morning.
Good morning, we can hear you.
My office, there are really kind of two general areas that we spend quite a bit of time in dealing with FERPA issues. Number one, given the number of students the university has, we receive lots of external requests to gain access to student records, typically in the context of some sort of lawsuit or some sort of legal dispute. FERPA allows the university to comply with these outside court orders, if you will, but before we can do so, we have to make sure that the student is aware of his or her rights under FERPA, so that the student can challenge the disclosure of their records. So I work very closely with the registrar's office in terms of dealing with these sorts of external requests for records. So that's number one. Number two, FERPA allows the student to have access to their records. And whenever there is a legal dispute, typically between the student and their academic department, and we see this from time to time with the School of Medicine, the School of Nursing, the law school, the pharmacy school, the College of Education. From time to time, there will be disputes between the student and their academic unit, and the student will request typically all electronic communications inside the department pertaining to the student. So that's a second area that we find ourselves having to round up those records, figure out what parts of the records the student can have access to. But that's all under the FERPA umbrella, because the request is FERPA allows the student to make that sort of request to inspect or review pretty much any university record that pertains to the student. And so those are the two general areas that my office spends some time in a FERPA context.
Thank you. All right, Dr. Martyrer.
All right, Aaron Martyr here, University Registrar. As Henry points out, we work very closely on requests for directory information and FOIA requests and things like that, external types of requests for student data, and always enjoy working with their office. They bring a wealth of knowledge to FERPA, and when we have issues around data breaches and things like that, which has been very rare these days. I think we're doing a really good job right now of maintaining some security around our records. I spend a lot of time, and as maybe many people on the call have interacted with our office in requesting access to student information. So we spend a lot of time trying to determine who is an authorized user within the institution that can view student records, and FERPA plays a big role in that. We want to make sure that everybody who has access to Student records is an authorized school official, so we try to document that those access requests and make sure that the appropriate people are authorizing that access. We're a large institution. We're 8 campuses. We manage all of that centrally, and we definitely have a lot of challenges in trying to coordinate it in a way that is customer friendly yet compliant. And so we're always working to improve that. I also spend a lot of time kind of in conjunction with DOIT determining whether companies that we contract with, software companies who are maybe using our data in their systems, systems such as EAB, Banner, DegreeWorks, different systems like that, that they are compliant, they have the proper privacy and security control set up in those systems. So we spend a lot of time looking at the contracts and making sure that they are remaining FERPA compliant. As Henry noted, students have a right to inspect their record. And so when a student, either a current student or a previous student, wants to inspect something, if they feel like there's a discrepancy, we manage that aspect of FERPA. And serve as kind of a general point of reference for anybody on campus who has FERPA questions. We've worked with the Advisement Center on creating a FERPA release form so that students can allow other authorized individuals to discuss their record. I think that will be discussed today. And again, a lot of challenges around creating a kind of universal FERPA release form with so many units and so many campuses. It's very difficult to manage a lot of that centrally, but we do the best we can. And I think we'll be discussing that today, and I'll turn it back over to you, Jane.
Great, thank you. Thank you both, and thank you for being here with us today. So just to start it off, I just want to spend a quick minute talking about a FERPA elevator speech. So I was participating in a training the other day, webinar on FERPA, and the person there talked about how important it was for us as advisors or people who work with students who may work with FERPA to have our elevator speech ready. And so this is more of how do you explain FERPA to students. So when you're meeting with the student before they fill out that form, how do you explain this to students? Because that's one thing, as I think Henry alluded to, is that we have to make sure students understand their rights, and we can't assume they do either. They actually yesterday, so this was perfect timing, all of the students received an email about their FERPA rights, and then the option to either keep their what we call directory information protected, private, confidential, or to share that. And so they received the email, but we know with emails, not all students read it. So it's kind of, we need to be able to explain it to them so they fully understand, because they are our clients. We're here to help them. And so basically what I learned in this is, you know, you need to explain FERPA, but you need to say what it stands for, not just FERPA, that it's the Family Education Rights and Privacy Act. Telling the student that all of their education records, including academic and advisement records, are theirs and they're private, and that they as the student get to choose what records get to be shared, the directory and education records, and who has access to these records. So who they list on that form, or who they want to allow to see these records. So good points of the elevator speech are to describe information that you will typically discuss. So if you say, if you sign this form, I will discuss grades, academic standing, course enrollment, degree progression. Like, these are the things I'm going to talk about with somebody else listening. And then also, you need to talk to the student before getting a written FERPA release. Don't assume they know they have these rights, and just having a conversation with them is best practice for FERPA. So that's just really quick, but just something to think about. Like, do you have your elevator speech ready? Do you know how to talk about this with students? So jumping right into our FERPA facts and facts. I know you guys like that. So first thing, when do students' FERPA's rights begin at U of SC? So for newly admitted students, FERPA becomes effective on the first day the student begins class at U of SC. This was actually something that Aaron and I talked about yesterday, because this policy handling of student records was updated this summer. So to give better language to this, so this is what the policy says, that a student is enrolled for FERPA purposes on the first day the student begins class. FERPA protections begin the first day of enrollment, which is the student's first day of class. So we're saying that multiple times. So this is something that's important for all of us to know, that that first day of class in the fall, or if they're taking summer classes, is the first day of enrollment. And I will make sure you all can get a copy of this policy as well. So from that, I know a lot of you are probably thinking, can I speak with a parent or guardian present during orientation advisement? Based off of this policy, so this was something that I was updated, new that I learned yesterday, would be yes. So according to the policy, as long as a student has not previously been or is not currently enrolled in courses, you may speak with them present. One thing that's very important is the student needs to verify that you are speaking with their parent and guardian. This is for parents and guardians. So ask the student, is this person here, your parent or guardian? Are you okay with me speaking with them? And recommended language would be talking to the student. Your parent can join the conversation today, but as of the first day of class, you're going to need to fill out the FERPA form. So saying that ahead of time, that moving forward when classes start, that things are going to, will need to change a little bit. But I wanted you all, this is probably going to be one of the biggest changes or new things that everybody knows. So I wanted to make sure you all were aware of this. Second, do I have to release information to parents, guardians if the student is a minor? No, you can't release information without student consent, regardless of their age. I've heard a few times that people think that if they're 17, they're a minor, they're still, you can tell the parents whatever. You cannot. So when a student turns 18 or enters a post-secondary institution, the second one here is in our policy. So once they attend school beyond the high school level, the FERPA rights transfer from the parents to the child. And so this is something that it's good for students to know, that because they're just used to their parents being able to get all of their records in high school, have access to everything. And so for them to understand that, even if they're younger. But we all know that a parent can submit tax information claiming that student as a dependent. They need to, if you hear this from a parent, if they say, well, I claim them on taxes, I can talk to you, you need to refer to the registrar's office. I'm going to say this multiple times, is the registrar's office is going to be our first point of referral for a lot of these if we have questions or aren't sure what to do. Do I have to release information to parents, guardians if they have power of attorney? This might not be something that comes up very often, but it has. So not necessarily. Most power of attorney authorizations don't specify academic records. It's my understanding that power of attorney has to be very specific as to what the person has access to. With this, you can refer to the registrar's office first, and then they'll refer to legal if necessary for that. When should I have a student complete the FERPA release form? When the student requests that you discuss information with somebody other than them. It's not recommended to just send out a blanket email saying, hey, fill out this FERPA form so that it's convenient for us to have it on file. We need to work in the student's best interest, and if we have a parent show up, or if we have a student say, my mom wants to sit in on this, then we can talk to them about FERPA and get the FERPA request form. Does the student have to submit the online FERPA release form for advisors? No, you don't have to use the online form, but this is a recommended best practice. There are paper forms that colleges and departments have used and still might use. We prefer the online form, so we did work with the registrar's office to develop this form. It has to be authenticated, so students have to use their ID and password to fill it out. You all get an email, we get an email. Now, one thing that you all know, this is advisor specific. So it doesn't release like 2 or 3 of you in your department. It just releases you to speak to the student, but that's okay. What we're doing is we're trying to work on the student's best interest. So it's also easier to track. If you know you have rights to talk to a parent, then they might have to fill out multiple forms, and they might complain about that. but you can just tell them that we're doing our due diligence to make sure your FERPA rights are protected. Something also is if, you know, it's a quick conversation, or if maybe you have a parent jump in the back of the screen and it's something quick, an email from the student's UFSC email account can be used for a one-time conversation. So if this happens, just have the student shoot you an email saying, I give permission for my mom, Jane Bachnight, to be on this call at 11 a.m. on Friday, September 25th. Just so that we have that in writing from the student, and it's coming from their email account, so that's how we verify that it is coming from the student. But I would say that would just be for something that is going to be a quick one-time. We would absolutely recommend the online form. And then, Aaron, do you have anything to add about the online form? I know you said something quickly at the beginning about it, but we do have those questions about, you know, why can't we have a universal form or one that works for a whole department, things like that.
Sure. This has been a topic that we've been discussing for a while, and I think the big issue, some of the challenges we have with creating kind of more of a universal form where a student might be able to kind of opt in on what data can be shared, can't be shared, with whom, is that, first of all, we kind of have some technology issues. It would be nice if we could, you know, if a student could go into kind of a common portal, complete that, but then, you know, people who are working with students could also go to a common place to review any FERPA waivers that the student might have on file. It might actually integrate with the student profile or something and highlight that they have something on file. So we just don't have that kind of customer service portal that we would really like to have. The other challenge we have is just role definition. The Advisement Center has done a tremendous job of defining the advisor role on campus, and kind of having one point of entry where advisors come in and do training and get their access. And so we have a good way of communicating and working with advisors, but we have a lot of roles on campus that access student data that we don't have clearly defined. Some of the academic leadership roles, such as department chair or program director, things like that, where we don't really have a common entry point for those positions, and oftentimes where it's a challenge to even know who has kind of come into the position, as some of those individuals in those roles turn over, you know, every couple of years. And so I would say the biggest role issues are kind of this role definition issue, and then really kind of a centralized, user-friendly portal for both students and employees working with students that have access to student data.
Thank you. And another thing before I move on is that we do say that this is a best practice. So in the University Advising Center, we do hope that you use the online form. We have access to it on the back end, so that if you all have any questions, or if you lose an email, you can also email me or Mike or Paige, and we can log in and check for you. Did you receive this? Yes, I can let you know almost immediately if we have the FERPA form on file, and it just kind of holds things in one place forever as long as we're using this database. So am I required to release student information? I know this can be hard when you're an advisor and you have a parent there and you have the FERPA form signed, but no. So even with student consent, you do not have the legal obligation to release protected education record information. Only the disclosure of education records to the student is required. And even then, the student would have to go through the process to get education records beyond what you might talk to them in an advisement session about. So one thing in this trainings that I've been on is I've heard is, when in doubt, don't give it out. To protect yourself, to protect the student. There's language that, you know, you can say, I appreciate your questions. Because this is related to FERPA protected information, I need to check with maybe my supervisor or the registrar's office before continuing this conversation, and I'll be back in touch with you within the next day. It's okay to do that. There is nothing, you are not legally obligated to, if you get a question that kind of throws you off and you're not sure about how you should answer it, press pause and tell the parent or tell the student, you know what, I need to check on that. I need some more information. and I will get back to you. I would give them a time frame, not say as soon as possible, but I will get back to you within 24 hours. And then you can go and check with your supervisor or check with the registrar's office, because it might be that your supervisor should jump in the conversation and join you on that. So just wanted you to know that just because FERPA waiver sign, you're not legally obligated to speak. How should I document FERPA related conversations? The FERPA form should be uploaded to Notes in EAB Navigate. I know most of us know this. Include other notes specific with what was discussed and who was in attendance in the summary notes. So you could say, discuss FERPA with student for consent, have them submit the form's uploaded, and then the student, maybe student's father attended the meeting, we discussed, and then general academic related topics. Just like any other notes, good practice for that is you don't need to go into too much depth, but just those general things that you discussed while somebody else was in the meeting. You are allowed to keep your what we call memory notes. So those would be notes that maybe you write down or you keep somewhere else that you do not share with anybody to help you remember this conversation, that then can't be, if somebody comes back and wants their records, if they're your memory notes, you don't have to turn those over to the student.
Jane?
Yeah.
If I can interject. This aspect of documenting interactions with students and parents, this is a core area that whenever there's a legal dispute, this sort of documentation becomes very critical in terms of what information was provided to the family. All of you need to keep in mind when you generate these sorts of records that potentially the student and the parents are going to have access to what you've documented. So just always have that in mind when you create these sorts of records, that it's not going to be just for your internal use necessarily, or for your department's internal use, that potentially the family is going to have access to the record. All of you from time to time will have parents who are very demanding, parents who are very insisting that whatever it is they want should be done. And when you document those interactions, you want to do it in a way where, so for instance, you don't want to say, well, parent so-and-so is a jerk. Instead, what you want to do is document the things that indicate the parent is a jerk. So for instance, if the parent has called 5 times and you've told the parent the same thing in each one of those conversations, well, document that. The parent called me on June 3rd, June 9th, June 12th. We discussed issue X. I told the parent, I gave the parent the same response each time. That sort of documentation, if there is a legal dispute, becomes very critical in terms of our ability to show the narrative of we provided accurate information, but we were dealing with a parent who, we weren't telling the parent what he or she wanted to hear. So this is a critical area where you want to be very deliberate in the manner in which you go about documenting the information that was provided to the family. Thanks, Jane.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Oh, Jane, one other thing. I spend more time reading university employee emails than anything else. Because whenever there's a legal dispute, emails become front and center. And so, I'm not entirely sure how y'all go about communicating internally, but whatever sort of electronic system of internal communication you're using, Once again, keep in mind that whatever you're saying about a student or the student's parents in the context of those sorts of internal communications, however they're being documented, you want to be very mindful that uh, potentially the family is going to have access to your communications. Uh, you also, any university platform that has been provided to you for purposes of conducting university business, you don't want to mix in any sort of personal stuff. You know, I'm sometimes amazed when I'm going through someone's emails. I see lots of personal stuff. One of my favorites is a cabbage soup recipe. I keep this recipe on my desk. It's a pretty good recipe, but you don't want to be using university resources for any sort of personal use or personal communications. But my concern is that you become very informal with your use of university resources, and that kind of informality, number one, doesn't make us look good, but number two, sometimes induces university employees to communicate with each other very informally, and you start saying things about a student or about a parent that doesn't cast us in a very positive light. Thanks, Jane.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Okay, so now that we're all in this season of virtual advisement, what should we do if another person can hear the conversation? So I know this has happened with me since we've been working virtually. The first thing is just to remind the student or tell the student that if anyone can hear the conversation, a FERPA form must be completed. This might be something that's we could think about including in like a messaging we send before the meeting, but maybe suggest prior to at the beginning that the student either find a private space or use headphones to keep the information discussed private. And then if someone drops in on the conversation, stop and remind the student of FERPA and follow the process to get the release consent. So that could be one of those quick times where we have an email sent or have them fill out the form. I don't think it takes any longer for them to do a form than it would to send an email. Can I speak to individuals named on the FERPA release without the student present? So yes, you can. However, it's best practice to include the student on conversations where FERPA protected information will be discussed. Ask the individual if they've already talked to the student about what they want to discuss with you. So if mom calls me and is, wants to know about grades or is concerned about a class or, isn't sure how their student is doing this semester, ask them, have you talked to your student about this? Keep the conversation as general as possible. If you can refer to policy, resources, general situations, where our policy states that for academic probation is below 2.0, and you can find it online. It's in our bulletin under there's a chart that shows you what probation is, how to get off probation, so that you're not necessarily speaking directly to that student if they're not there. Encourage the individual to follow up with the student and tell them that you're going to follow up with the student as well. And follow up with the student so that they're aware that the conversation happened. It's just good practice for customer service. And so one thing yesterday, Aaron and I were having a discussion about this and talking about how students and parents, we know they have these relationships and that it's their responsibility to communicate effectively. And a lot of them can share information 24/7 through these systems. We know that a lot of students just share everything with their parents or not. And sometimes when students and parents don't have good communication, we get caught in the middle and we want to try and fix that, but that's not our role to fix that communication. And so it's our role to help facilitate maybe encouraging them to have better communication, but we don't have to get caught in the middle just because a FERPA form is signed. So just keep that in mind, that you know, we can talk in generality, but also just make sure that you are keeping the student and protecting them first if this does happen. Because I know it's happened to me where, you know, FERPA form got signed, and then every week I was getting the same call from the parent, and it was, you know, trying to loop the student back in so that they're involved in this conversation as well. Should I release student directory information upon request? So no, refer the person to the registrar's office. The requester must, it should be must, be verified and authorized. So just some directory information includes name, date of attendance, the campus, whether they're a full-time student, their degrees, their university email address. And this is what students got in their email yesterday, where they could decide, do they want this information released, or do they want to keep it totally confidential and private? So the registrar's office will verify from whoever's requesting this information that the reasons why they need it and that it's okay to release this information to them, even though we, you know, according to FERPA, you can release the directory information. One thing I do want to show you is, you will see, you might have seen this already, is on accounts that have this confidential. This is where they have signed the form to not have their directory information released. So if you see this, that's just an indicator to you that they have chosen to keep their directory information private. When should I ask for help with a FERPA related situation? Anytime you need support, please, please, please. If you have questions, if you're unsure about something, reach out to your college or department or supervisor, or to one of us in the UIC, to Mike, Paige, Claire, myself. We're available to help. We've all been working with FERPA for a long time. We know who else to go to or how to work through some of these situations. Or you can also reach out to the registrar's office for support. They have a contact us button on their website. That's what we've been directed to use if you have a question, you need to forward something on. And I believe Erin's working on getting an actual FERPA reason so that they can follow up with you and be back in touch with a parent or whoever within the next day or so about a FERPA related concern. It's not recommended to talk to other advisors or colleagues, because kind of what Henry was alluding to, like, we don't want either things written down or on file, because remember, FERPA, does that other advisor have a legitimate educational interest to know the information or to perform their job? And so is it that you're asking for help? Do they need to know? Are they working with the student as well, that they would be able to provide insight and help you with FERPA? And so we just recommend that first you go vertical to a supervisor or to someone in the UAC office that can help with a FERPA related situation. And please know that it's okay to press pause if you're in a conversation on FERPA and you're not sure how to handle it, and tell the person you'll get back to them, and then come to somebody else for some support. All right, so now we have about 9 minutes left, and I want to respect everybody's time. So if anybody has questions that they want to drop into the chat, I know I had a couple. Let me see here if we've answered it. Any other questions related to FERPA that I didn't? Are FERPA forms specific to departments or advisors? So the online FERPA form is specific to advisors. So that's for you for the academic year. Upon a student death, how do we handle FERPA? Any expert advice on that?
Yeah, Jane, the conventional wisdom is that FERPA rights end upon death. But that's not the approach my office has been taking with dealing with that situation. We will typically only release student-related information to the personal representative of the deceased student's probate estate. Now, there can be some exceptions to that. We've had multiple situations where, for a variety of reasons, the family would want access to the deceased student's email account. That poses all kinds of issues and what we deal with. But generally, the approach we take is we will only release uh, the information from the deceased student's account to the personal representative. And anytime a situation like that arises, feel free to just consult my office and we'll help work through the issue.
I can add to that, and I agree. Henry's office, general counsel, is the primary resource there for deaths that occur kind of in our current semester. There is a kind of protocol that happens behind the scenes that a lot of people might not know about, but oftentimes, things escalate to the dean's office, and then they coordinate with Lisa Gerald, our ombuds person at the university, who also coordinates with general counsel as well. And so I know with our office, if we get certain requests where maybe a family wants to get more involved with the student record, I typically refer those to Lisa Gerald, who in turn is communicating with the dean of the college that the student was enrolled in, along with general counsel. So that's kind of the approach that we're taking for access to student records for, it could be that somebody's grandfather attended here and they're putting kind of a historical type of thing together. Again, we refer to general counsel just to make sure that we're handling it in the right way. So.
And as a quick follow-up from the Advisement Center standpoint, when Lisa Gerald does make the communications out to the deans and the colleges, I also make a communication to each individual assigned advisor to remove the advisor assignment. So if there is an issue that pops up like that, we'll let you know for sure.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions that somebody wants to drop in the chat, or feel free to unmute yourself and ask while we have our experts here? Okay, so we have one. Can you discuss liability when a student has confirmed that he or she is the only one on the call, video, chat, and the advisor takes that in good faith, but a parent materializes out of thin air? Other than ending the conversation immediately, is there another consideration you need to make?
So if I'm understanding the question, it's some sort of virtual communication where the student has indicated that they're alone and that someone else then appears in the virtual session?
Yes, that's what. Yes, in a remote appointment. So if the student's indicated they're alone, and then yes, somebody appears without you knowing that they had been there to hear.
Well, I think that's an opportunity to have a conversation with the student that, this is a confidential communication, and that there should not be anyone else there. And if the student doesn't want to comply with that, you're certainly within your right to say, well, we're going to end this session.
And I would say, and Catherine, you can jump in if there's anything, like if we'd already discussed information with the student and maybe it had been heard, is there any liability or anything like that with what we had already said, not knowing that somebody was listening?
I don't see any basis for a liability claim in that context, where it's the student's responsibility to make sure that there aren't other folks around. There's nothing we can do. I mean, this is a virtual communication. The student controls the space that the student is in, and so if there's someone there, either with or without the student's knowledge, there's nothing the university can do to have prevented that from occurring. I think the most important thing is to make sure the student understands on the front end that there should not be other people present. And so I would not be concerned about any sort of a liability claim coming out of that scenario.
Thank you. Okay, so we had, and Aaron, Paige put in a screenshot or clip of, it looks like from self-service, where the confidential marker is on there like I showed, and then there's a deceased marker. So is that what will show in the banner entry if that's what's happened?
I don't believe that the deceased indicator is present in the profile, but I need to double check that. I do know that anytime there is a deceased student, we do check the confidentiality box, and so I don't see the screenshot though. Let's see here.
Okay.
Oh, well, yeah. I'm sorry. Yeah. So those do pop up in the self-service area. I apologize. Yes. So both of those are available to the advisor or anybody accessing the self-service profile.
Okay. I have another question, and Dora, so the FERPA form for students completed this summer, are those just for the summer or do they apply to other semesters? So Dora, good question. With learning yesterday about when the FERPA rights begin in the fall, for students who just started, we have been moving forward with, if they sign one in the summer, it was good for the full academic year. So going through till the end of next spring, and I would say that we're safe to do that. But I would have, if we have one on file, have that conversation with the student again and say, hey, I have a FERPA form on file from summer orientation, and now we're having a new conversation with your parent. Is it okay that we have this conversation? And note that in your notes that you discuss that with students.
And Jane, just to add to that, this is Aaron. I think the FERPA release form is just a good way to verify the relationship too. I mean, just because someone says they're the parent of a student doesn't mean we don't have the right to verify that relationship. And so you can use that FERPA waiver in advance of the first day of class just to say, I'd appreciate, student, if you filled this out and you added the name of a person who you want us to speak with, just so we can verify that that's the person.
Yep. And then Jillian said, not sure those work for other areas, but in music, FERPA form must be filled out for every situation. There's nothing wrong with that. That actually probably covers you better than just having one for the full year. So you're guaranteeing that every time you speak with that student was okay per the form for you to speak with whoever is listed on that form. Again, we, you're doing your due diligence or extra due diligence on making sure that you're protecting their FERPA rights. To understand what you're saying.
And Jane, I've noticed, and I'm sure everybody else has, when you explain to parents that you're protecting the student, they tend to appreciate it, even though they're not getting exactly what they want at that moment in time. There is a general kind of appreciation, even if there's some redundancy where they say, gosh, we filled this one out in the residency office, in the advisement office, in the student's academic college. I think just emphasizing that we want to be careful, and we apologize for the service part of it, the convenience part, but the compliance part we're passionate about, and we want to make sure that we've got things covered. They tend to appreciate it, although I'm sure there are some parents that don't. But
thank you. All right, so we're a couple minutes past 9:45, so I want to we have one more question. We can go for that, and if you all have follow-up questions, feel free to send those to me, and I will follow up with whoever I need to follow up with to get the answers for you. But our hope was today to just take some of these questions that we get a lot and clarify for you all, kind of at a higher level than what is FERPA, the ins and outs of that. But we just wanted to make sure that we address some of these common questions that you all have related to FERPA, let you all know who your resources were related to FERPA. So supervisors, UAC, administrative staff, Aaron in his office. Just know that you have support around campus related to that.